She saw her first love at a cafe on Christmas, not knowing he was a lonely millionaire CEO. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Snow drifted past the frosted windows of Rosewood Cafe on Christmas Eve morning, while the smell of cinnamon and fresh brewed coffee wrapped around everything like a warm hug. The little cafe on the corner of Maple Street had been decorated within an inch of its life, with twinkling lights and garland, and a tree in the corner that the owner, Mrs. Bellamy, insisted on putting up herself every single year. Inside, the warmth pulsed like a heartbeat, while outside the world turned white and quiet. Marin Cole had been on her feet since 5 in the morning, and every muscle in her body was screaming for rest. But rest was a luxury she couldn't afford, so she just kept moving. She wiped down the counter for the 100th time and checked the clock, barely 8:30, and reminded herself that she only had 6 more hours until her shift ended, and then she could pick up Beckett from the back room where he was doing homework because she couldn't afford a babysitter on Christmas Eve. Her 6-year-old son was her entire world. The reason she dragged herself out of bed when everything felt impossible, the light that kept her going when the darkness crept too close. She had been doing this alone for 5 years now, working double shifts at the cafe and cleaning offices at night. And some days she forgot what it felt like to not be exhausted. But Beckett needed new winter boots, and rent was due next week, and dreams were for people who had the luxury of sleeping. The door jingled and cold air rushed in, along with a man holding a little girl's hand, both of them dusted with snowflakes, like they had stepped straight out of a Christmas card. The man was tall, with dark hair, touched with gray at the temples, dressed in casual clothes that somehow still screamed expensive. Everything from his coat to his watch, to the way he carried himself like someone who had never had to worry about making rent. Marin looked up with her automatic customer service smile, and then her heart stopped completely. The coffee pot in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor, hot liquid splashing everywhere. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stare at the face she had spent 12 years trying to forget. Grayson Hayes, the boy who had promised her forever underneath the stars when they were 20 years old and stupid with love. The boy who had disappeared one summer without a goodbye, without a phone call, without anything except silence that stretched into months and then years. She would have recognized him anywhere, even with the gray in his hair and the tired hollows under his eyes that hadn't been there when they were young. She dropped to her knees behind the counter, pretending to clean up the mess, while her hands shook so badly she could barely hold a towel. Maybe he wouldn't recognize her. 12 years was a long time, and she had changed so much, aged and worn down by life in ways that showed on her face. Her hair was in a messy bun, and her apron was stained, and she looked nothing like the bright-eyed girl with big dreams who had believed every word he said. Mrs. Bellamy appeared beside her with worry written all over her face. "Honey, you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Marin whispered, even though her voice cracked on the words. "Just clumsy. Can you take that table? I need a minute." But Mrs. Bellamy was already swamped with the Christmas Eve rush, and there was nobody else, and Marin had no choice except to stand up and do her job, even though every instinct screamed at her to run out the back door and never look back. She grabbed her notepad and walked toward their table with her head down, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. "Welcome to Rosewood. What can I get you started with today?" "Marin?" His voice hit her like a wave she wasn't ready for, the same voice that had told her he loved her, the same voice that had made promises he never kept. She forced herself to look up and meet his eyes, those gray eyes that used to make her feel like the only person in the world. "Hello, Grayson." The little girl tugged on his sleeve with the impatience of a 7-year-old who wanted hot chocolate immediately. "Daddy, do you know her?" Daddy? Of course he had a family. Of course he had built a perfect life while she scraped together tips to buy her son winter boots. The bitter irony of it burned in her chest. "We knew each other a long time ago," Grayson said softly, his eyes never leaving Marin's face like he was memorizing every line in shadow. "Before you were born, sweetheart." Marin pulled out her pen with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. "What can I get you? Can we talk, please? I've thought about you every single day for 12 years, and I never expected to. I'm working." She cut him off because she couldn't do this. Couldn't make small talk with the man who had shattered her while she stood there in a stained apron counting the hours until she could collapse. The special is peppermint mocha. Take your time. She walked away before he could say another word and made it to the back room where Beckett was coloring at a small table, his tongue sticking out in concentration the way it always did when he was focused. He looked up with a gap-toothed grin that made everything else fade. "Mama, I finished my math. Can I have a cookie?" She knelt down and hugged him tight, breathing him in, reminding herself why she kept going. Her son, her reason, her everything. When she went back out, Beckett followed because he was bored and curious, and the little girl at Grayson's table spotted him immediately. "A boy, Daddy, look. Is he the lady's son?" Before anyone could stop her, she was running over and asking Beckett if he liked dinosaurs, and within 60 seconds they were best friends, comparing notes on which dinosaur would win in a fight. Grayson appeared at the counter looking like a man who had something to say and no idea how to say it. "He's yours?" "Yes. He's wonderful. Marin, I need to explain what happened. I wrote you a letter. I never got any letter." The words came out flat and hard. "What I got was silence. Months of waiting for a call that never came. And then I saw your face on a magazine cover, Hayes Tech's Golden Boy, and I realized you just left. You built a whole life and never looked back." His eyes filled with actual tears. "My parents intercepted the letter. I didn't know until years later. They told me you had moved on, that you didn't want to hear from me. I believed them." Marin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Convenient. It's the truth, and not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted leaving the way I did." She looked at him standing there in his expensive coat with tears on his face and felt the wall around her heart crack just slightly before she reinforced it. "You want to know what happened after you left? I dropped out of school, met a guy who seemed nice until he wasn't, got pregnant. He left when Beckett was one. I've worked double shifts for 5 years to keep a roof over our heads." The tears were streaming down his face now. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know." "Sorry doesn't fix 12 years, Grayson. Sorry doesn't give me back my dreams, or the nights I cried myself to sleep, or the years I spent wondering what I did wrong." He reached for her hand and she pulled away. "I lost my wife 4 years ago. Car accident. I've been raising Piper alone, burying myself in work, going through the motions. I came back here because I couldn't face another Christmas in that empty house." Something flickered in her chest against her will. Widower, single father. Lonely despite everything he had built. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said quietly, and she meant it. "Thank you." He paused. "Marin, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but seeing you again, our kids already becoming friends. Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't make this into something it's not. You broke me, Grayson, and I put myself back together without you. I don't need you to swoop in now and fix things." She walked away before he could respond, but she felt his eyes following her for the rest of her shift. When they finally left, Piper waved frantically at Beckett through the window, and her son waved back with a smile she hadn't seen in months. Grayson had left a business card on the table. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, and put it in her pocket instead of throwing it away. Some doors are better left closed, but some doors have a way of opening whether you want them to or not. Grayson came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, always with Piper in tow, always ordering coffee he barely touched, always watching Marin from across the cafe like he was waiting for permission to exist in her space again. She told herself she was only allowing it because Beckett had never connected with another kid the way he connected with Piper. The two of them inseparable from the moment they spotted each other. But deep down she knew that wasn't the whole truth. He never pushed, never crowded her. He just showed up, tipped generously without being offensive about it, and talked to Beckett about dinosaurs with the kind of patience that made her chest ache in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. Her son had started looking forward to those visits in a way that terrified her, because Beckett had learned young that people left, and she didn't want him getting attached to someone who might disappear. Mrs. Bellamy noticed everything because that woman had eyes like a hawk and opinions she wasn't shy about sharing. "That man looks at you like you hung the moon and stars," she said one afternoon while Marin was restocking napkins. And that little girl of his already loves Beckett like a brother. That man broke my heart 12 years ago, Marin replied without looking up. I'm not doing this again. But she watched him with Beckett through the kitchen window, watched him kneel down to see a dinosaur drawing at eye level, watched him high-five her son when he got a math problem right, and something inside her that she had kept frozen for years was starting to thaw against her will. One evening after closing, when both kids had fallen asleep in a booth exhausted from playing, Marin found herself alone with Grayson in the quiet cafe. Mrs. Bellamy had gone home early, and the silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. He helped her stack chairs without being asked, and she let him, because she was too tired to argue. Can I tell you about Charlotte? His voice was soft in the empty room. Marin paused with the chair in her hands. Your wife. He nodded and sat down at the counter, looking older suddenly, worn in ways that money couldn't fix. We built the company together. She was brilliant, driven, everything my parents wanted from me. We had a good marriage, a real partnership. Then 4 years ago, she was driving home from a meeting, and a truck ran a red light. Marin set down the chair and sat across from him. I'm sorry. I wasn't a good husband at first, he continued, staring at his hands. I was still carrying guilt about you, about how I left things. Charlotte knew. She made me deal with it, made me go to therapy, made me face what I had done. She deserved better than a man who was still haunted by his first love. The words hit Marin somewhere deep. Grayson, when she died, I threw myself into work because that's all I knew how to do. Piper raised herself half the time. I was a ghost walking through my own life. He looked up at her with wet eyes. Coming here, seeing you again. It's the first time I've felt awake in 4 years. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Just sat there in the quiet with him while snow fell outside, and their children slept peacefully, unaware that their parents were trying to navigate something neither of them understood. The next week, Beckett did something that stopped Marin's heart. They were at the cafe, and Grayson was helping him with a reading worksheet when her son looked up with those big, serious eyes and asked, Mr. Grayson, do you have a dad? Grayson's face softened. I did, buddy. He passed away a few years ago. Beckett nodded slowly, processing this information. I don't have a dad. He left when I was a baby. Mama says we don't need him. The pain that crossed Grayson's face was raw and real. Your mama's really strong, Beckett, but you know what? I think she could use a friend. Everyone needs friends. Beckett tilted his head. Are you Mama's friend? I'm trying to be. Marin had to turn away because she was crying, and she didn't want either of them to see. Her son had never asked about his father, had never seemed to notice the absence. But hearing him say those words out loud broke something inside her that she had been holding together with tape and willpower. A few days later, Grayson asked her to coffee. Just the two of them, while Mrs. Bellamy watched the kids. She agreed against her better judgment, and they sat in a quiet corner of a different cafe because Marin couldn't handle having this conversation at work. He told her about a position at his company, something flexible with good pay and benefits, something that would let her use the design skills she had abandoned 12 years ago. His eyes were hopeful and earnest, and she felt the walls slamming up before she could stop them. I can't take charity, Grayson. It's not charity, it's recognizing talent. You were the most creative person I knew in college, and that person is gone. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. I'm not some project you can fix to make yourself feel better about leaving. I've been taking care of myself and my son for 5 years without anyone's help. She left before he could respond, angry at him for offering, and angry at herself for wanting to say yes. Everything fell apart 3 days later when Tyler showed up at the cafe. Marin hadn't seen Beckett's father in 5 years, hadn't heard from him since he walked out on a 1-year-old baby without looking back, but she recognized him immediately. He was thinner than she remembered, harder around the edges, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hey, Marin, long time. He leaned against the counter like he belonged there. I heard you're doing well. Nice little setup here. Her blood ran cold. What do you want, Tyler? Can a guy check in on his son? His voice was casual, but his eyes were calculating. I've been thinking about Beckett lately, thinking maybe I want to be part of his life. You haven't paid child support in 5 years. You don't get to just show up. Tyler's smile faded, and something ugly flickered across his face. Here's the thing, Marin. I'm in a rough spot. Need some cash to get back on my feet. I figured maybe you could help out, considering I am the boy's father. I don't have any money, but your new boyfriend does. His eyes darted to where Grayson's business card was pinned on the bulletin board behind the counter. Yeah, I've been watching. Rich guy with a fancy car coming around every day. Seems like you've upgraded. Marin's hands were shaking. Get out! Tyler stepped closer, dropping his voice. $5,000 and I disappear. You never see me again. But if you don't cooperate, I'll file for custody. I'll tell the courts about your unstable housing, your exhaustion, how you leave our son in a back room while you work. How do you think that'll look? He left with a smirk and Marin collapsed against the counter, trying to breathe. Everything she had built, everything she had survived, could be taken away by this man who had never wanted Beckett in the first place. That night she texted Grayson 2 words, "Stay away." Then she blocked his number before she could change her mind. She couldn't drag him into this mess. Couldn't let Tyler use Grayson's money as leverage. Couldn't risk losing Beckett because she had let herself get close to someone again. But Tyler's texts kept coming, each one more threatening than the last. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except her son and how she had failed to protect him from a man who saw him as nothing more than a bargaining chip. At 2 in the morning on a night when the snow was falling thick and silent, Marin packed a single suitcase, one change of clothes for each of them. Beckett's stuffed dinosaur, her tips from the last week. Nothing else mattered. She wrote a note for Mrs. Bellamy explaining that she had to go, that she was sorry, that she would call when she could. Then she wrote another note, shorter, the words blurring through her tears. Grayson, I have to protect my son. Please don't look for us. Thank you for everything. Marin. She lifted Beckett from his bed, wrapped him in a blanket, and carried him through the dark apartment. He stirred against her shoulder, mumbling something about dinosaurs, and she pressed a kiss to his forehead. Shh, baby. We're going on an adventure. The bus station was empty at this hour, just flickering fluorescent lights and hard plastic chairs and the distant rumble of engines. Marin sat with Beckett curled in her lap, watching the snow pile up outside, waiting for a bus that would take them anywhere but here. She had spent her whole life running from pain, from disappointment, from anyone who might get close enough to hurt her. But sitting in that bus station with her sleeping son, she wondered if maybe she was running from the wrong things. The departure board flickered. A bus to Chicago, leaving in 20 minutes. She could disappear, start over, become someone new. She was reaching for their bag when headlights cut through the darkness outside. A car she recognized, a door slamming, footsteps running toward the entrance. And then he was there, Grayson Hayes, standing in the bus station doorway with snow in his hair and desperation in his eyes, holding the note she had left like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Grayson stood in the bus station doorway with snow melting in his hair and panic written across every line of his face, holding the note she had left like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. Marin stared at him, unable to move. Beckett still sleeping against her shoulder, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it echoing off the empty walls of the station. How did you find me? Her voice came out hoarse and broken. Mrs. Bellamy called me. She found my number in your things when she saw your note. He walked toward her slowly like she was a wild animal that might bolt at any second. Marin, please don't get on that bus. You don't understand. Tears were streaming down her face now. Tyler is going to take Beckett. He's going to drag me to court and tell them I'm an unfit mother and I don't have money for lawyers and I can't fight him. Grayson knelt in front of her, his eyes level with hers, his hands reaching for hers without quite touching. You're not fighting alone anymore. I can't take your money. I can't be your charity case. I've been doing this on my own for 5 years and I can't. This isn't charity, his voice cracked. This is me choosing you, the way I should have chosen you 12 years ago, when I let my parents convince me to walk away. I left once, Marin. I'm not leaving again. I'm not letting you disappear. Beckett stirred in her arms, his small voice thick with sleep. Mama, where are we? I'm cold. Grayson looked at her son, at this little boy who had stolen his heart over dinosaur drawings and math problems, and his face softened into something so tender it made Marin's chest ache. "Hey, buddy, what do you say we get you and your mama somewhere warm?" Beckett blinked at him with bleary eyes. "Can we go home? I don't like it here." Grayson looked at Marin and held out his hand. "Let me take you home. Both of you." She looked at the departure board, the bus to Chicago leaving in 10 minutes, the promise of anonymity and escape. Then she looked at the man kneeling in front of her, the man who had driven through a snowstorm in the middle of the night because he couldn't bear the thought of losing her again. She took his hand. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and paperwork and court dates that made Marin's head spin. Grayson hired the best family attorney in the state, a woman named Patricia who took one look at Tyler's case and laughed out loud. 5 years of abandonment, 0 child support payments, text messages threatening blackmail. The man had handed them everything they needed to destroy him. Tyler's confidence crumbled the moment he realized Marin wasn't alone anymore, that she had resources and support and a legal team that made his public defender look like a first-year law student. He tried to backpedal, tried to claim he just wanted to be part of Beckett's life, but the evidence was overwhelming and the judge wasn't buying a single word. Full custody to Marin, restraining order granted. Tyler ordered to pay 5 years of back child support before he could even think about requesting visitation. Marin walked out of that courthouse holding Beckett's hand, blinking in the winter sunlight like she had just emerged from a tunnel she'd been trapped in for years. Grayson was waiting on the steps with Piper, both of them bundled up against the cold, both of them watching her with identical expressions of hope. "It's over," she whispered, still not quite believing the words. "It's really over." Grayson pulled her into his arms and held her while she sobbed with relief, all the fear and tension she had been carrying finally releasing in huge shuddering breaths. Piper grabbed Beckett's hand and started chattering about how they could have a sleepover to celebrate. And somewhere in the chaos of that moment, Marin realized that she had a family again. The months that followed were the happiest she could remember since before everything fell apart. Marin and Beckett became fixtures at Grayson's house, then residents, then simply family. The kids were inseparable, fighting over the remote and stealing each other's snacks and bickering like siblings who had known each other their whole lives instead of just a few months. Grayson helped Marin enroll in online design courses, not as charity, but as an investment in her future. She started taking freelance clients, small projects at first and then bigger ones as word spread about her talent. The dreams she had buried 12 years ago were coming back to life, and this time she had someone cheering her on instead of holding her back. She watched Grayson become a father to Beckett in all the ways that mattered, teaching him to ride a bike and reading bedtime stories and showing up for every school event like he had been there from the beginning. Her son started smiling more, laughing more, asking fewer questions about why other kids had daddies when he didn't. One night, Piper crawled into Marin's lap during movie time and whispered, "Is Marin going to be my mommy?" And Marin had to leave the room because she was crying too hard to answer. Christmas Eve arrived exactly 1 year after Marin had seen Grayson's face in Rosewood Café and felt her world tilt on its axis. He insisted they go back, said it was important, said he had something planned, and she agreed even though she had no idea what he was up to. Mrs. Bellamy burst into tears the moment they walked through the door. "My favorite family. I've been waiting all day." She hugged each of them in turn, lingering longest on Marin. "I knew it," she whispered. "The first time he came in looking for you, I knew." They sat at the same table by the window where Grayson had waited for her that first morning, the same table where she had shattered a coffee pot and tried to hide from her past. The cafe was decorated exactly the same. Twinkling lights and garland everywhere, the tree in the corner that Mrs. Bellamy still insisted on putting up herself. Grayson was acting strange all through dinner, fidgeting with his napkin and checking his pocket every few minutes and barely touching his food. Marin caught Mrs. Bellamy giving him meaningful looks from behind the counter and felt her heart start racing, even though she told herself she was being ridiculous. "Okay, what is going on?" she finally demanded. "You've been weird all night, and if you don't tell me what's happening, I'm going to—" Grayson stood up. The cafe went quiet. Even Piper and Beckett stopped their constant chatter and turned to watch with huge eyes. 1 year ago, I walked into this cafe broken and empty and convinced I would never feel whole again. His voice was shaking, but he kept going. Then I saw you, the woman I should never have left. The woman I never stopped loving even when I tried to convince myself I had moved on. Marin's hands flew to her mouth. I made a mistake 12 years ago, the biggest mistake of my life. I let fear and pressure and other people's expectations take me away from the only person who ever really saw me. He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. But I'm not making that mistake again. He dropped to one knee and pulled out a small velvet box, and the entire cafe gasped in unison. Marin Cole, I have loved you since I was 20 years old. I have carried you with me through everything, through success and failure, through loss and grief, through every moment that made me who I am. You are my first love and my last love, and I am asking you right now to let me spend the rest of my life proving that I will never leave again. He opened the box to reveal a ring that sparkled in the Christmas lights. Will you marry me? Beckett jumped out of his seat, screaming, Say yes, Mama, say yes. And Piper was right behind him, yelling, Please say yes, please, please. And Mrs. Bellamy was openly sobbing into her apron, while customers at other tables were pulling out their phones to record. Marin was laughing and crying at the same time, completely overwhelmed, looking at this man who had found his way back to her after 12 years of wandering. Yes, she managed through her tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The cafe erupted in cheers as Grayson slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home after a very long journey. They got married the following summer in a garden filled with flowers and fairy lights, with Piper as the flower girl and Beckett as the ring bearer, both of them walking down the aisle together because they refused to be separated even for a ceremony. Mrs. Bellamy sat in the front row, next to Grayson's sister, both of them crying before the music even started. Grayson's vows were simple. I lost you once. I spent 12 years regretting it. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that you are chosen, that you are wanted, that you are loved beyond measure. Marin's vows were simpler. You came back. After everything, after 12 years, after I had given up on fairy tales and happy endings, you came back. That's all I ever needed. 2 years later on Christmas Eve, the family gathered in their living room to decorate the tree. Piper was 9 now and very opinionated about ornament placement. Beckett was 8 and more interested in the cookies than the decorating. And in Marin's arms, wrapped in a soft blanket and sleeping peacefully, was baby Charlotte. She has your eyes, Grayson said softly, looking at his daughter named for the wife who had taught him how to love after loss. She has your stubbornness, Marin replied with a smile. Piper appeared at her elbow. When Charlotte gets bigger, can she be in our club? Beckett and I have a club. What kind of club? The kids whose parents found each other at the Café Club, Beckett explained like this was obvious. We're the founding members. Grayson laughed and pulled all of them close. His family, this impossible, beautiful family that had grown from chance and choice and the courage to try again. We made it, Marin whispered against his chest. He kissed her forehead. We finally made it home. Sometimes the loves we lose find their way back to us. Sometimes the mistakes we make can be healed by time and grace, and the willingness to show up even when it's terrifying. Grayson left Marin 12 years ago and built an empire, but he was hollow inside. Marin stayed behind and built a life from nothing, but she was exhausted and alone. Fate brought them together in a cafe on Christmas, and this time neither of them let go. If this story reminded you that second chances are real, that it's never too late to choose love, and that home isn't a place but the people who refuse to give up on you, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to believe their story isn't over. Merry Christmas, and thank you for being here with us.